Prologue. I never imagined my life could spiral this far. My mother's life was hanging by a thread, her sickness slowly consuming her, and I was helpless until the unthinkable happened. To save her, I had to give up everything: my dignity, my innocence, my very self. The auction was horrifying, every second a nightmare I couldn't escape. And then I saw him, the billionaire who won. Dominic Blackwood. My new boss. The man I'd feared, hated, and yet secretly craved. He claimed me in front of the world, but behind closed doors, he became something far more dangerous, far more irresistible. Dominic is ruthless, possessive, and obsessive. He hides secrets darker than my own, and I can't tell if he's my savior or my doom. Every glance, every touch, every whispered word drags me deeper into his world, a world where power, obsession, and desire collide. I thought this was about saving my mother. But now, I'm not sure I'll survive the billionaire who owns me. Part 1. I never imagined my life could collapse so completely. One moment, I was trying to balance my meager savings with rent, groceries, and hospital bills. The next, I was staring down a choice that felt like a nightmare too grotesque to even exist. My mother, Evelyn, was dying, her body failing despite every desperate effort I made. The doctors had said the treatment that could save her was astronomical, a number I didn't even want to whisper out loud because I knew I didn't have it. And then the message arrived, like a black shadow creeping into my life, a golden envelope, the kind you see in movies, bearing a seal that sent a shiver down my spine. "We can save her," it read. "There is a price." I stared at it, incredulous. My hands shook as I opened the envelope, pulling out the single sheet of paper inside. My heart stuttered and then fell into a cold abyss. The words were clear, merciless, and unimaginable. To save her, I would have to give up something I had never considered giving to anyone. Something I had protected, cherished, and believed was mine alone. My virginity. I laughed at first, because surely, this had to be a cruel joke. But the tremor in my hands betrayed me. The amount listed, the conditions, the rules, it was all real. My mother's life was balanced on this horrifying decision. And despite every fiber of my being screaming against it, despite every instinct telling me to run, to scream, to fight, I realized that I had no choice. I would do it. I would do anything for her. The night of the auction was a blur of bright lights, too many faces, and a heavy, suffocating tension. The room smelled of expensive cologne and power. Men and women in tailored suits, their eyes sharp and predatory, whispered numbers like spells, bidding on lives as if they were commodities. I wanted to turn and flee, but something, fear, desperation, the invisible chains of responsibility, kept me rooted to the spot. And then I saw him. Dominic Blackwood. The name alone carried weight, danger, and infamy. He was everywhere in the media, whispered about in hushed tones in high society. Ruthless, cold, untouchable. And yet here he was, his sharp gaze settling on me like a predator assessing its prey. My stomach dropped. The auctioneer's voice faded into the background, numbers and bids spinning around me until all I could feel was the force of Dominic's stare. The gavel hit the block. The room went silent for a heartbeat. And then, horrifyingly, it was official. Dominic Blackwood had won. My blood ran cold. The man who now owned me wasn't just a billionaire, he was my new boss. My future, my present, was now tethered to a man who was as terrifying as he was magnetic. When I first walked into his office the following day, I felt like a criminal caught in the glare of a merciless judge. The room was sleek, minimalist, designed to intimidate, and at the center of it all was Dominic. He didn't smile. He didn't even acknowledge the auction, but I could feel the weight of his claim pressing down on me, a force I couldn't resist. "Sit," he commanded. The word was sharp, and I obeyed without thinking. "You belong to me," he said, his voice smooth and low, carrying a dangerous undertone that made my pulse race and my chest tighten. "Everything about you is mine, until I say otherwise." I wanted to argue, to scream, to deny him in every way possible, but I couldn't. Not if I wanted my mother to survive. So I stayed silent, trapped in his gaze, feeling both terror and a strange, aching pull I didn't understand. Workdays blurred together. Dominic's presence was suffocating and addictive. Some days, he would be impossibly cold, distant, commanding obedience with nothing but a glance. Other days, his attention would land on me in ways that made my breath hitch, that left me trembling and confused. I couldn't tell if it was cruelty, desire, or some twisted combination of both. And the deeper I went into his world, the more I realized that surviving wasn't just about keeping my mother alive, it was about keeping my own heart intact, which was rapidly slipping from my grasp. Then came Victor Kane. His name alone made me shiver. A rival billionaire, cunning and cruel, with a reputation for exploiting weakness. He knew about the auction, about Dominic, about me. I felt the first real wave of fear not tied to the auction itself but to the danger surrounding Dominic's world. Victor was relentless, stalking every move, watching every interaction. It wasn't just a battle for money or power, it was a war, and I was caught in the crossfire. Dominic, of course, knew. He always knew. And he became both my protector and my tormentor. There were moments when he would brush against my arm, his gaze lingering, the intensity of it almost unbearable. I hated it and craved it at the same time. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his words left me trembling. "You're stronger than you realize," he said once, his voice low, almost reverent. "But don't mistake that strength for freedom. You're mine." Even as I hated his possessiveness, I couldn't deny it. There was a thrill in the danger, in the tension, in the knowledge that my life, my choices, and my heart were entangled with his. And then the first time he truly tested me, not in the office but in private, I realized just how deep the darkness went. He pushed boundaries, reading me, teasing me, controlling me in ways that left me raw and vulnerable. But every time, he also saved me, shielded me, protected me from the world outside, from Victor, from threats I couldn't even see. It wasn't fair. It wasn't safe. And yet I couldn't look away. The days grew longer, the stakes higher. Dominic's world was intoxicating, dangerous, and I was powerless to resist it. I watched him maneuver through corporate battles, fend off enemies, and dominate rivals, and I realized the auction had only been the beginning. I wasn't just his possession, I was a part of a world that demanded cunning, strength, and ruthlessness. And then came the moment I knew nothing would ever be the same. Victor Kane had found a way to manipulate the situation, testing Dominic, probing for weakness. He sent threats to my mother, whispers that made my blood run cold. I felt my desperation spike, my fear of losing Evelyn consuming me. But Dominic was already planning, already moving, already controlling every piece on the board like a master strategist. And I, for the first time, felt the strange, terrifying comfort of knowing he was there, that he would stop at nothing to protect me. Even so, I wasn't just a passive player. I began to learn, to watch, to anticipate. I found that I could influence, could bend situations subtly, using my own intuition and cunning in a world dominated by men like Dominic and Victor. I was still frightened, still desperate, but I was learning to survive, to fight back, in ways that surprised even me. And yet, every night, when Dominic would enter the room, when his gaze would lock onto mine, I felt the impossible weight of desire, fear, and something far deeper. I hated it. I resented it. And yet, part of me longed for it, craved it, needed it. I was his possession, yes, but I was also human, capable of feeling, of wanting, of breaking. The tension built with every day, every interaction, every whispered word or lingering touch. And in the back of my mind, a dark, thrilling, terrifying question lingered. What would happen when the world we lived in collided completely? When Victor struck directly, when Dominic's obsession became too dangerous, when I realized that surviving wasn't just about my mother anymore, it was about me, my heart, my soul, and the darkness that had claimed us both. The auction had taken everything from me. My innocence, my security, my freedom. But Dominic had taken something else too, something I hadn't expected. My attention. My fear. My desire. My surrender. And as much as I hated to admit it, I was beginning to realize that I couldn't survive this world without him, and maybe, terrifyingly, I didn't want to. Part 2. The call came late at night, shattering the fragile calm I had clung to. "We have your mother," Victor's voice hissed through the phone, sharp and triumphant. "Come alone, or she dies." My chest tightened, my stomach turned, and every rational thought fled. I wanted to scream, to curse, to throw the phone, but before I could, Dominic was already beside me, his hand gripping mine with an intensity that made my heart leap and my pulse thunder. "You don't go alone," he said, voice low and dangerous. "I'm coming with you." His gaze burned into mine, and I felt a mixture of relief, fear, and something else I didn't want to name. Desire, maybe. Or the knowledge that he could destroy me as easily as he could protect me. We moved through the city streets like shadows, our footsteps silent against the asphalt. Every instinct screamed danger, but the presence of Dominic, his cold precision, and unwavering focus gave me a strange, terrifying comfort. When we arrived at the warehouse, the night air was thick with menace, a heavy tension that made it almost impossible to breathe. Victor appeared, leaning casually against the wall, a cruel smile on his lips, Evelyn bound and trembling behind him. "So, this is Dominic Blackwood," he said, his tone mocking. "I've been waiting for this moment." Dominic didn't flinch. He stepped closer to me, his hand brushing mine briefly, grounding me, thrilling me, terrifying me all at once. "Release her, Victor," he said calmly, every word laced with lethal intent. "Now." Victor laughed, underestimating Dominic, and that's when everything exploded into chaos. He lunged, Dominic moved, and the fight began, a blur of motion, shadow, and danger. Dominic was ruthless, precise, and terrifying in ways I hadn't fully comprehended until that moment. I wanted to step back, but I couldn't. My mother was there, and I had to protect her too. I grabbed a loose pipe, swinging at anyone who came near. My heart pounded, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Dominic moved like a storm, eliminating threats with terrifying efficiency, his eyes always on me, always protective, even as he struck fear into our enemies. I had never seen anyone like him, and yet, even in the chaos, I couldn't stop noticing the way he watched me, the way his gaze lingered, claiming me even in the midst of violence. Finally, it was over. Victor lay defeated, bleeding and unconscious, as the authorities closed in. Dominic immediately turned to my mother, cutting her bonds, his hands steady, reassuring. "Evelyn, it's okay. You're safe now," he said softly. My mother trembled, tears streaming down her face, but she was alive. Alive because of me, yes, but because of him too. I didn't have time to breathe, to process, before Dominic's gaze found mine. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You should know," he whispered, his voice low and intimate, "I didn't just buy you for your mother. I've been obsessed with you for a long time." My chest tightened. Obsession. Desire. Love. Fear. All of it tangled together, dangerous and intoxicating. I hated myself for wanting him, even as I feared him. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face, and I shivered under his touch. Back at his penthouse, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the windows, the tension between us was electric. He was calm, but I could see the storm beneath his exterior. I was his possession, yes, but also something far more complicated. I was a challenge, a temptation, a part of a world he had carefully controlled for years, and now I was inside it, irreversibly. He approached me slowly, deliberately, and I couldn't look away. "You think you're safe now," he murmured, "but nothing about us will ever be simple." I swallowed hard, the weight of what had happened still pressing on me, yet the pull between us was undeniable. I had feared him, resented him, even hated him at times. But now, standing so close, I realized I craved him as much as I feared him. We didn't speak for long, not with words. Our communication was in the touches, the glances, The almost imperceptible movements that said everything without saying anything at all. Dominic was careful, controlled, yet every action hinted at a possessive, dark obsession that sent shivers down my spine. I was his. Not just by the auction, not just by circumstance, but by something deeper, something raw and consuming. Days passed, but the tension didn't fade. Dominic continued to assert control, but there was a subtle shift. He trusted me more, involved me in decisions, watched my reactions with a dangerous curiosity. And I, in turn, began to see cracks in his armor, a vulnerability buried beneath layers of ruthlessness. I realized that he was as damaged as he was powerful, and that knowledge only drew me deeper into him. Victor Kane was gone, for now, but the threat of the world outside remained. Dominic's life was one of shadows, enemies, and power struggles, and I was now irrevocably part of it. Every day brought a new challenge, a new danger, and the realization that I had been thrust into a life far more dangerous than anything I had imagined. One night, as rain poured against the windows, I found myself alone with Dominic in the penthouse. The city below glittered, indifferent to our struggles, but inside, the atmosphere was charged, almost unbearable. He approached me silently, his eyes locking onto mine, and I felt a shiver of fear and anticipation run through me. "You've changed," he said quietly, brushing his hand along my arm. "You're stronger than you were. You're not just surviving, you're fighting back." I swallowed, my throat dry. I had to, I admitted. I can't lose my mother. I can't lose myself either. His gaze softened, but only slightly. "And yet, you're here, with me. In my world. Do you realize what that means?" "Yes," I whispered, though my voice trembled. I did realize. I realized that being with him, being a part of his life, meant danger, obsession, and darkness. But it also meant desire, protection, and an intensity one had never known. I wanted it, even if I feared it. Dominic stepped closer, his presence enveloping me, and for the first time, I stopped resisting. I let him close the distance, let him claim the space between us. It wasn't just about the auction anymore. It wasn't about fear or obligation. It was about us, dark, dangerous, consuming. And in that moment, I understood the truth. Surviving Dominic Blackwood's world wasn't about escaping. It was about surrendering. Surrendering to the danger, the desire, the obsession. Surrendering to him. I didn't know what the future held. There would be challenges, enemies, and secrets yet to be revealed. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Dominic Blackwood had me, body and soul, and I was no longer afraid to give in. Even as I surrendered, I remained aware of the fine line between passion and peril, love and obsession, trust and danger. And I knew that in Dominic's world, nothing was simple, nothing was safe, and everything was intoxicating. The auction had taken my innocence, my freedom, my choice. But it had also given me something I didn't expect, a dark, thrilling, terrifying connection with a man who was as dangerous as he was irresistible. And I realized, with a shiver of both fear and excitement, that I wouldn't have it any other way. I closed my eyes, leaning into him, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a strange, dark kind of peace. Dominic's hand on mine, his presence around me, and the knowledge that we were bound together, by danger, by desire, and by something far more consuming than either of us could name. And as the city lights flickered outside, I allowed myself to surrender completely, knowing that in this darkness, in this dangerous, twisted world, I had found something I never thought possible. Power, survival, and a love that was as consuming as it was dangerous.